Sri Lanka's most powerful news brand.
Good evening and welcome to the News First newsroom. I'm Ramesh Irugal Bandara. Now 2015 was 3 years ago. 2015 was a year of many changes. We got a new president, a new prime minister, a consensual government, and it was also the year of the bond scam. Now, the bond scam has dominated the national discourse over the past 3 years because of its sheer magnitude. But that does not mean the sins of the past should be forgotten. For those in the administration who touted claims of fraud, malpractice and embezzlement from political arena to political stages, they seem to have forgotten the sins of the past because the public does not see any action being taken in this regard. So, for the benefit of them, here is a small reminder of the sins of the past. We of course begin by going back to 2004. In 2004, Sri Lanka was struck with tragedy, that is the Boxing Day tsunami. There was devastation caused island-wide, and to repair the country, there was plenty of money that was coming in the form of aid. And that brings us to helping Hambantota. Now, people in this current government, when they were campaigning for the presidential election as well as the general election, they claimed that there was a loss of around 84 million rupees through this helping Hambantota case. We even recall a former Chief Justice coming before the media and saying that he apologizes to the nation for the verdict that he delivered. This is something that we have not forgotten. From hedging deals, or rather, from helping Hambantota, we cross over to the MiG Deal, a loss of 28 million euros, not rupees, 28 million euros. We all remember how there was claims of fraud with regard to the purchase of MiG aircraft from Russia for the Sri Lanka Air Force. We also remember the claims of 2 MOUs being present. We also recall how certain third-party companies that were involved in this transaction disappeared from the face of the earth when the investigations were going on. It is also widely believed that the death of our colleague Lasantha Wickramatunge was prompted because of his investigations into this very deal. From MiG aircrafts to Airbuses and Boeings, SriLankan Airlines. Now, we all remember how SriLankan Airlines was making profits and was the pride and joy of Sri Lanka as our national carrier. However, under the Mahinda Rajapaksa regime, there were changes in management that took place. There were cronies who were put in, there were relatives who took over the management, and in aircraft terms, it took a nosedive. And we don't need to explain the current state of SriLankan Airlines. Yes, the current administration has a role to play, but there was a bigger role played during the period that we are considering right now. From there, we switch to another deal, the hedging deal, a loss of 28 million US dollars. This was a gamble on part of the former regime that did not pay off. Loss to the country is $28 million. Imagine if the country had this money. Imagine what the state of Sri Lanka's economy would be today if this money was in the hands of the people. We move on to another saga which dominated the national discourse, which was the Avantgarde dealings. Now, the Sri Lankan government lost out on a substantial amount of money because they offered these services that the Sri Lankan Navy is currently doing. In the past, it was done by a private firm. Now, we recall who was instrumental in forming such companies, and we also recall how weapons were issued for these companies. We also recall how floating armories were found with these weapons, but their serial numbers were not present. The people of this country remember all of this. From Avantgarde, we move on to the Greek bonds, another gamble by the Sri Lankan government that was taking place under the former regime. The loss to the country, 3.8 billion rupees. What we did was we invested Sri Lanka's money in the economy of Greece in Greek bonds. The economy of Greece tanked, and we ended up with nothing. From there, we also recall memorials that were built using public funds for the purpose of certain people's families. We recall how public money was spent for these purposes, but what did the public get from spending their money for these purposes? From there, we move on to a certain media channel. Now, during the elections, there were plenty of accusations that were made. They asked, how can a government employee start up something like this with a government salary? There were issues that were raised with regard to the base of operations of this particular company as well. The Norocchole power plant. Now, what is the first word that comes to your mind when you think of the Norocchole coal power plant? For me, it's breakdowns, because over the past few years we've been reporting on numerous breakdowns of the Norocchole coal power plant. During the campaign trail, there were plenty of people who made accusations that this was a used power plant that was palmed off to Sri Lanka. It has been 3 years since this government came into power. So why haven't these people who made these claims back then done something about it? Where are the investigations? Who has been prosecuted? From there, we move on to a case that has concluded, the silk cloth case. 600 million rupees of funds from the TRC was misused for this purpose, and this case concluded with this gentleman, a senior public official, Lalit Veeratunga, being put behind bars. Why? Because he simply followed orders from higher above. From there, we move on to another branch of the government, the Sri Lanka Transport Board, the SLTB. During the election campaign, during the election period, services of the SLTB were used, but the payments were not made. Those were the accusations that were leveled at the former government. We also can't forget the land dealings, the issues with regard to land and properties that were raised during these campaign trails. There was a plot of land in Mount Livenia that was linked to Yoshitha Rajapaksa. Now there is currently an ownerless mansion in Malvana that is linked to Basil Rajapaksa, former minister Basil Rajapaksa. These are all things that happened back then. We also cannot forget the atrocities that happened under the previous administration. At this point of time, I would like to recall the murder of Lasantha Wickrematunge, the assaults on journalists like Keith Noya, Poddala Jayantha and Upali Tennukon, the disappearance of Prageet Eknalikoda, the murder of Wasim Tajuddin, the murder of Roshan Chanaka, who died while protesting his right to the Employees Provident Fund. We recall the shootings that were carried out in Ratupaswala when they were asking for water. We recall the shootings that were carried out at the Valikada prison, the trapped inmates who were gunned down in cold blood. We recall the white man abductions. We recall the bombing of the Sirsa Media Institute. We recall the bombing of Sieta and newspapers like Udayan. The people have not forgotten. But it seems that the people who made these claims back when they were campaigning, back when they were in the opposition, they seem to have forgotten these things, because the people do not see any progress in these investigations. And frankly, it seems like the people are tired of waiting for this government to take action. It has been 3 years since the silent revolution took place, and as I said, it seems that the people are really getting tired. Unfortunately, the people who have made these claims have fallen asleep. I'm Ramesh Irugal Bandara. It's back to the studio for the continuation of the news.